It seems that he started about 9 o'clock in the morning, and went on until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when he succeeded. The fever died away, and he was cured right there, and then the chitta became concentrated, and went down and reached its natural level, where it rested for about 2 hours. Finally, at about 6 o'clock in the evening, he left the place where he had been practicing samadhi meditation, with a buoyancy of body and heart, without anything left to cause him trouble. The fever had completely gone, and his chitta had become bright and skilled with wisdom, exalted and famous within himself, and he has lived with the Vihara Dhamma since then, right up to the present. Venerable Ajaan Khao was resourceful and absolutely resolute in striving, and it would be hard to find anyone else to equal him. Now he has gone to the ultimate happiness, Parinibbana. But when it came to striving in the way of Dhamma, he was very skilled and resolute without weakening throughout his life. When he walked Jangama, each time he went on for 5 or 6 hours before taking a rest, and even the young bhikkhus could not equal him. Such is the striving of the wisest men, who are so very different from the rest of us, who tend more to look forward to the time when we can rest our heads on our pillows, as if pillows are more exalted than the path, fruition, and nibbana, which, when one looks at it and thinks about it, should make one ashamed of how clever one is in those ways which are completely lacking in essential value. An unusual and remarkable thing about Ajaan Khao was how, whenever he thought about anything, that thing came in accordance with his thoughts almost every time. For example, he might have thought about an elephant which he had not seen for many years, and how it had not been seen here at all, or maybe it had been shot by a hunter. Then, in the middle of the night, after such thoughts, the elephant would come straight up to his hut and stand there playfully touching and stroking things round about, so as to let him know that he had come, after which it would turn and go back to the forests and hills, and he would see no more of it, for it would not normally return. When he thought about any of the tigers, the same sort of thing would happen. If he thought of a tiger which used to roam about the district, and how he had not seen it for ages, and perhaps it had been killed, when he thought of it in the day, that tiger would come at night and wander about the wat, and about where he was staying, so as to leave marks to let him know that it was still alive. Then it would go back to the forest, and would not stay about there or return again. He said that it was very strange how whenever he thought of any animals round about, the one he thought of would soon appear, and this happened almost every time. It was as if something went and told those animals to go to him. But a bhikkhu who is so exalted inwardly as Venerable Ajaan Khao must surely have devas to wait on him all the time, to help him and make things convenient for him, and to follow his thoughts and wishes. Then, whatever he thinks about, that thing will come to him in answer to his thoughts, whatever they may be. Otherwise, why should things come to him right after he thought about them every time like this? For other people such as ourselves can think about innumerable things and go on thinking over and over again about them without seeing anything coming in answer to our thoughts and desires. At least, nothing which should make us think that we may have some virtue, and that we are people who are worthy of reverence like Venerable Ajaan Khao. But then, our thoughts are mostly so worthless or evil or disturbing to the heart, which gets nothing but difficulty and torment from them without seeing anything good concealed within them at all. It is really shameful that our thoughts create nothing but dukkha for us thousands of times per day, until our minds are dull and worn out and incapable of doing any more work. Venerable Ajaan Khao had a very large number of followers, including bhikkhus, samaneras, and lay people from all parts of Thailand, who regularly came for teaching and training in Sīlaratano. Although by the end of his life he tried to live quietly and be on his own much more than he used to, so as to preserve the khandhas and extend their life as far as he could, and also to be of value to those in the world who he should accept and help, and there were very many of them. After he had finished eating his meal, he usually started walking Jangama and working in the ways of Dhamma practice for 1 or 2 hours. Then he left the path where he walked, and went back to his room, where he rested and did meditation practice until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If he had no other business to attend to, he then walked Changama again and worked at his practice until it was time to sweep the paths and clean up the wat. After this duty he had a wash, and then returned to the Changama path, and walked while doing his practice until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, when he stopped. From then on he did some chanting and meditation practice, until it was time for him to rest his body until about 3 o'clock in the morning. In other words, 3 a.m. was the time when he got up to do his meditation practice, until it was time for him to get ready to go Biography. After returning from Biography, he took food to give his body strength to go on living for as long as his vibhaka, results of karma, would let him. This was the daily routine which he strictly adhered to, unless he had other necessary duties which he had to do, such as being invited to go out to various functions, which necessitated a break in his routine. Those who have such exalted Dhamma virtue as Venerable Ajaan Khao are not concerned to search for happiness and joy from anything so much as from the Dhamma within their own hearts alone. Their way of living is replete with Dhamma inwardly, and whatever the posture or situation of the body, their hearts are in a constant state of happiness, which neither increases nor decreases. For increase and decrease are a pair of opposites, which is the way of our world of duality. The reason why they are like this is because they each have a heart which is single and pure throughout, and imbued with the one Dhamma alone, eki power. This makes no relationship with anything else such that there would be a duality, with one standing out better and more prominent than the other. Therefore there is a peace and happiness in it which cannot be compared with anything else. For the citta which has purity throughout its nature is a citta which has a calm, peace, and happiness which is entirely satisfying, and there is no desire for anything else to increase or develop it, for it would only cause turbulence and concern in vain, without being of any value at all to that citta. So those who possess such a citta like to dwell alone, and they have no liking for distractions and disturbances, because they are things that trouble the calm and happiness in this natural state which is complete in itself. For such things cause the citta to stir and vibrate and to receive knowledge via the various sense doors. This is why they like to slip away and live in a way that suits them, which is the most appropriate and right way for their characteristic tendencies. But others who do not truly understand their ways are likely to think that they do not want to receive guests, or that they do not like people, and they slip away to save themselves alone, and they are not interested in teaching and training other people. But in fact, the truth is as we have described it above. As far as teaching goes, it is hard to find those who teach with complete purity of heart and filled with metta, without any interest in worldly gain or any recompense at all, such as Venerable Ajaan Khao. Because in teaching people of every level, every class, and every age, they teach with true knowing and true seeing that is completely genuine and aimed at bringing benefit to whoever receives it, and they do so with metta in a manner that is unimpeachable. The only exceptions are in those cases when some people go and trouble them with irrelevant and unnecessary things, like those we have described above. So they may not receive and teach everyone who comes, because it is not possible for a bhikkhu to act in wrong ways just to comply with the unreasonable requests of those who do not keep within the limits of what is reasonable and proper. For the bhikkhu himself would become involved, be in trouble, and come to loss together with the one he is sorry for. For some years, Venerable Ajaan Khao spent the Vassa period in the hills on his own, while relying on 2 or 3 families of farmers to give him food when he was out on Paṭipadā each day. He said that for those who are ordained, this type of life provides the most happiness and peace of heart for the practice of Dhamma. All one's time is filled with the effort to practice the way, and there are no other burdens or duties to trouble one. One's time is one's own, one's effort is one's own, in every situation, and the citta with Dhamma is one's own in all that one does, and there is nothing to distract one and divide up one's attention, causing it to diminish below what it had been before. One who is ordained and who lives in the present as if tonight is the only night left to him is not concerned how much longer he is going to live, nor with any of these disturbances, for this that he is doing is of incomparably greater value than anything else. Venerable Ajaan Khao said that when he spent the Vassa period by himself in the hills along the borders of Sakon Nakhon and Galisin provinces, he lived in a place 3 or 4 miles distant from the nearest village. There were many wild animals in that district, including tigers, elephants, wild oxen, red bulls, barking deer, wild boar, and deer of various kinds. At night he used to hear these animals, their calls echoing through the forest, and they would wander in search of food, often coming close to where he was staying almost every night. Sometimes he could see them, and they came so close to him he could almost make out what kind of animal it was. Seeing these animals made him feel joyful, with metta and compassion for them. I cannot remember what year it was that Ajaan Khao spent the Vassa period in these hills, but I know it was soon after Venerable Ajaan Mun had died. He said how, in this Vassa, when he practiced meditation for samadhi, it seemed that Venerable Ajaan Mun came to visit him constantly throughout that Vassa to talk Dhamma to him and give him friendly Dhamma advice, sammodaniya Dhamma. In doing his routine duties in the vicinity of the cave where he stayed, and in all other activities, such as arranging his few possessions, if he did anything improperly, Venerable Ajaan would point it out to him every time. Therefore, it was just as if he had lived with Venerable Ajaan Mun for the whole of that Vassa period. Venerable Ajaan Mun came and told him about the customs and traditions of the Thutanga bhikkhus who are intent on attaining freedom, saying, "The various Thutanga routines should be maintained and done properly in the way that the Lord Buddha prescribed, and they should not be altered." Then he talked about the Thutanga practices that he taught his followers to do when he was still alive, and he repeated what he said for emphasis. Thus, "In teaching my followers to practice the way throughout right up to the end of my life, I taught those Thutanga practices which I knew about with certainty, without any doubt at all. Therefore you should take them to heart and practice them with a full and complete commitment. And you should never think that the sasana is exclusively the treasure of the Lord Buddha or any one of his Savaka followers. For in fact, the sasana is the treasure of whoever cherishes it and is interested enough to practice the way, and thus includes everyone who aims to gain value from the sasana. The Lord Buddha and all the Savakas retain no part of the sasana which they gave to the world fully and freely, and you should not think that the Lord and the Savakas would dispense both parts which were good as well as parts which were bad or tainted. For when we practice the way, whether we do so rightly or wrongly in any part of it, is up to each one of us, and in no way does it depend on the Lord Buddha and the Savakas. You have come here to practice the way, and this is your own particular purpose. Whether you practice rightly or wrongly is also entirely your own business. Therefore you must be very careful in what you do, so as to live contentedly in the Dhamma of one who has seen the truth, Dittha Dhamma. You will shortly become an Acharya with many followers, and you must set a good example to show what is right and seemly, so as to be an exalted symbol of righteousness and truth, and a blessing to all who follow after you, so that they who follow you will not be disappointed. Being an Acharya is a very important position, and one should examine what it means carefully. For if just the Acharya himself goes wrong, he may also lead many others in the wrong direction. But if he does what is right, he can equally lead countless others in the right direction. You should therefore examine carefully all aspects of what it means to be an Acharya with many followers, so that others may have an unobstructed, smooth path, which will not be false because of taking you as their Acharya to teach them. The word acharya means one who teaches or trains his behavior which is displayed externally in his actions and manners in such a way that those who depend on him can hold him up as an example to be followed. It should not be the kind of behavior which is an external display of what comes from falsehood due to a lack of prior consideration and thought. The Lord Buddha, who we call the Sāsada, the great teacher of the world, was not the Sāsada only at those times when he was giving a talk on Dhamma to those Buddhists who came to listen to him, for he was the Sāsada at all times, in every situation and position, and whether reclining on his right side in the lion posture, sitting, standing, or going about the place. Even when he was within a Buddhist monastery, he would still be the Sāsada in all his behavior, in every action and every movement he made, and the Lord never did anything that was uncharacteristic of the Sāsada. Therefore, one who has mindfulness and wisdom and an inclination towards assessment and contemplation could take every movement and every gesture that the Lord made as a moral example that teaches people over and over again. You should not think that the Lord ever behaved in an abandoned manner like all people in the world, where they like to adjust and change their manners and behavior depending on the people and circumstances that they come across. For they behave like this in one place and act like that in another, which is the characteristic behavior of ghosts and pretas, even though they are in fact people, good or bad. They are to be found everywhere, and they have not got enough of a presence in them which can be held on to as a firm, stable principle, either for themselves or other people. But the Lord Buddha was not like these people of the world, for he was the great teacher in everything he did right up to the day of final Nibbana. Whatever action or characteristic he displayed, he was always the Sāsada, never deficient or incapable. So whoever holds to him as their refuge, which means a basic principle or example of how one should act and do things, can do so at any time in whatever they are doing, by following his example without any doubt as to whether the example of the Lord is suited to this occasion or not. This is why the title of the great teacher, the Sāsada, of the triple world system is well suited to the Lord. Even when the Lord was about to enter Parinibbana, he did so in the lion posture. He did not lie down as though he had thrown away his limbs and body, careless of them, afraid of death and repeating mantras and magical verses, so that he would go to this or that place or realm, which is the way of ordinary people everywhere in the world. But he died and entered Parinibbana composed in the lion posture. Meanwhile, his heart went through the process of entering Nibbana with unwavering courage and discipline, as if he was about to go on living in the world for aeons of time in the future. In fact, the Lord proclaimed that he was the great teacher at these final moments by entering Chana and Nirodha Samapatti, and then withdrawing from them until the right moment came and he entered Parinibbana, fully supporting his status as the great teacher without any remaining attachments to anything in the triple world. That was how the Sāsada, the great teacher, showed an example which was a standard pattern for the world to emulate, and he did this from the moment of his enlightenment to the time of his Parinibbana. Nor did he diminish or give up any of his standards of behavior below that required of the great teacher by behaving in the manner of the average ordinary person, for he dutifully maintained his position to perfection right to the end. Therefore you should take up the example of the Sāsada and put it into practice. For even though you will not be able to match the perfection of the Lord in all respects, it will still be in the category of one who follows the word of the teacher, not drifting uncontrolled like a boat in a storm adrift in the middle of the ocean which has not put out its anchor. The practice of someone who is ordained, but who has no right and firmly founded basic principle within him, is likely to be without any real purpose that can enable him to determine whether he will reach a shore of safety, or whether there will be various dangers ahead. He is like a boat without a rudder, and is not likely to be able to sail where he wants to go, and he is likely to drift with the ocean currents which can easily lead him into great danger. The principles of Dhamma and Vinaya, such as the Tūtanga observances, are the rudder of the practice which lead it to a safe goal. Therefore you should take hold of them and grasp them firmly, without wavering or vacillating, which would lead those who follow you, who will be many, to uphold this example and go wrong accordingly. The Thutanga observances are the practices which go straight and directly towards the goal, and there is no other practice that can equal them in this. It requires only that those who practice them must also use mindfulness, wisdom, faith, and effort in striving to do so. That Dhamma which they are hoping to attain should be within the scope of the Thutanga practices that have been handed down to us, and it is quite certain that they are capable of leading us to it without any doubts or obstacles being able to prevent it. For the Thutanga observances are the only way which leads to the beyond of dukkha. There is no other way, so you should not feel uncertain or have doubts. This way of Dhamma is also the place where all the methods of practice and development gather together and lead into the process of quenching all dukkha. Those bhikkhus who have a liking for the Thutanga observances as their mode of development are those who have love and faith in the great teacher, who is the first teacher. Whereas those bhikkhus who have taken up the Thutanga observances as their way of progress are those who have an established tradition and the great teacher as their refuge in every situation. Wherever they go or stay, they have Dhamma to help and protect them in place of the Sasada. They are not lonely, aimless, or unstable, for their principle of heart is the principle of Dhamma, and this principle of Dhamma is the heart. Their breath going in and going out is Dhamma, and it is intimately blended into a single unity with the heart. These people are the ones who are eternally living with Dhamma, and they never become disturbed nor off balance. For yourself, it is true that you do not have anything to worry about, but there are many other people who will associate with you, and you should have concern for all those who follow you, both fellows in Dhamma and lay people as well, so that they may feel contented in the practices which they have picked up from you, that they are a means of making progress, and that they are the right way and correctly portrayed without error. "This is how he taught me," said Venerable Ajaan Khao. He said further that if he slept over the time for him to wake, even just a little, Venerable Ajaan Mun would come and point it out to him, saying, "Don't trust yourself more than Dhamma, for yourself is the round of samsara, the varta. The elements of the body and the khandhas are the results that have come from the round of samsara right from the beginning. You should only give way to it to the extent that is necessary, but you must not give way to the khandhas more than you have to, for to do so is against the way of a bhikkhu whose nature is not inert or careless. Sleep and lying down for those who are truly wise is only for the purpose of giving a temporary relief to the elements of the body and the khandhas, and they do not look for pleasure or contentment from easing off the tiredness and weakness of these elements and khandhas. The bhikkhu who lies down as a bhikkhu should must be careful to remind himself of the time to get up. Like the mother of a deer who lies down to rest when out looking for food, who must be more mindful and careful of herself than normal. To lie down properly means to be careful to set up mindfulness, to make the intention to get up at the time that one decides to get up before going to sleep. Not lying down in the manner of one who sells off worthless goods, letting the customer give whatever he feels like giving for them. The bhikkhu who lies down letting his body go however it will is not a son of the Sakya, a Buddhist who guards the religion, promoting it in himself and others, but a bhikkhu who sells things having given up trying, letting the buyer fix the price. To lie down properly in the manner of a bhikkhu who is endowed with sila and dhamma as religious duties, a bhikkhu must have a regular pattern of procedure to follow before going to sleep, and this habit makes him careful and self-possessed when he lies down properly to sleep. As soon as he wakes up, he must get up quickly, not lingering, which is the way of a lazy person who tends to get up late and who dies immersed in careless indifference, never waking enough to become aware of himself. Lying down in this way is the way of an animal whose self has no meaning in its own life, and it is also the manner of a lazy person who destroys whatever value he has and is unable to rise up and improve himself. This is not the way of the sasana, and it should not be allowed to develop, for it will become a parasite creeper growing within the sasana and within the whole company of Thutanga bhikkhus, which will be one's own undoing, for a parasite creeper destroys the tree on which it depends. You should think about and compare the two concepts of lying down properly as against lying down in the usual way, which everyone understands. Compare them and search out where they differ, and how very different is the meaning in the lying down properly of a son of the Sakya as against the ordinary lying down of people and animals everywhere. Therefore the attitude of a son of the Sakya who sets his mind to lie down properly each and every time should be an important duty which cleaves to him, then and at other times also. This is important to one who is said to wear the mantle of mindfulness, and who has the wisdom to think with understanding and to use thought and contemplation in everything that happens. Not just thinking, just speaking, just acting, just lying down, just waking up, just eating, just taking his fill, just standing, just walking, just sitting down, all of which are just the behavior of carelessly relaxing, and going beyond the status and basis of a son of the Sakya, who should never act in these ways. It is generally understood by people that after the Lord Buddha and each of the Savaka Arahants had entered final Nibbana, they went into oblivion, and no longer had any meaning or relationship to oneself and other people. But this Dhamma, which is the basic causal condition that teaches us to practice in the present, is this not the Dhamma of the one who dug deep, searched, and brought it up for the world to see and to follow in practice? And the whole body of this Dhamma, how did it remain, and why did it not go into oblivion also? The fact is that both the Buddha and Sangha are the pure heart which has gone free, beyond the limits of both death and oblivion, by virtue of its nature. How could it die, be consigned to oblivion, or become meaningless, when its very nature does not accord with relative convention, sammati? When its nature no longer accords with relative convention, it is not subject to the power of death, nor going into oblivion, nor becoming meaningless. Thus, Buddha is Buddha in its own right, Dhamma is Dhamma in its own right, and Sangha is Sangha in its own right, and they are not shaken or disturbed by any of the ideas, attitudes, concepts, or thoughts of the relative world of conventions which create and destroy themselves. Therefore, the practice of Dhamma which accords with Dhamma, Dhammanuthamma, is the same thing as being face to face with the Lord Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, the whole time that one has Dhamma which accords with Dhamma within the heart, because the knowing of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha by natural principles must arise in the heart, which is the most suitable dwelling place for Dhamma, and no other vessel is more appropriate to it. This was the teaching with which Venerable Ajaan Mun admonished Venerable Ajaan Khao in his Samadhi meditation practice, when he saw that he had erred in some way. As, for example, in practicing the Thutanga observances incorrectly or not strictly enough, and waking up from sleep at the wrong time. He said, "In truth, Venerable Ajaan Mun did not admonish me just with the idea that I had done something wrong, but rather with the understanding that this acharya will be associated with many people, including bhikkhus, novices, and a large number of lay people in the future. Therefore he advised and admonished me often, so that this acharya will become strict and fully conscious in recalling the duties, so that he will pass them on to all the other bhikkhus and novices who come to live in dependence on him for peace and help, and they will be good and worthwhile things. in the same way as Venerable Ajaan Mun led his followers to practice the way. Venerable Ajaan also taught him that all one's possessions, such as the bowl, kettle, robes, and other things which one uses in one's dwelling, should be put down or put away properly and tidily, including also such things as rags for wiping one's feet. If one sees that any of them are not clean enough to be used, one should take them and wash them before putting them to further use. After using things, one should put them away or fold them up and put them away tidily, not just leaving them lying about all over the place. If on any one day this Acharya became too absorbed in some other affairs that came and intruded into his life, which made him forgetful and careless, he would see Venerable Ajaan coming to him in the middle of the night while he was practicing samadhi meditation, and he would admonish him and teach him and point out the way of Dhamma to him. He stayed alone in this cave for the whole of that Vassa period, and at night he was frequently visited by Venerable Ajaan Mun, who appeared to him as a nimitta of his meditation practice. Even sometimes in the middle of the day, when it was very quiet and he was sitting in meditation, he also saw Venerable Ajaan Mun coming to visit him in the same way as he did at night. He said that it was very pleasurable for him to be able to ask Venerable Ajaan all sorts of questions to make his understanding quite clear, for he was most proficient in answering questions with great skill and dexterity, and he made the answer so clear as to remove all doubt and uncertainty every time. With some types of questions he only had to have a feeling of uncertainty, although he did not think of asking about it. But at night, when he did his meditation practice, Venerable Ajaan would come and teach him, bringing up that question to explain, as though he had just asked him about it. He said how strange and wonderful it was, but he could not tell anyone else, because they would probably pass him off as a mad Kammatthana monk. But generally speaking, the Dhamma which cures the various kilesas only came from samadhi meditation, and it arose from nimittas, such as that of Venerable Ajaan coming frequently to admonish him, to show him the right way, and to give him Dhamma teaching. This promoted his mindfulness and wisdom, making him think and consider carefully, leaving no room for carelessness. He said how the Vassa period which he spent in that cave in the desolate jungle enabled him to develop various skillful methods which arose both internally and externally, and very frequently at all times of the day and night, and this was in marked contrast to all other places he had been in. He was one who lived in the present with joy and Dhamma in all postures and situations. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, he was filled with the bliss of Dhamma, Dhamma Pīti, in the midst of the peaceful Dhamma, Sandhi Dhamma. That is, his basic original ground, which is completely pure amidst the various kinds of Dhamma which come and go, making contact with the heart, and which then display their meaning in their various ways, refreshing the body and mind and making them joyful. Like a tree which is being cared for and supplied with fertilizer and water, and grows in a suitable climate and environment, which always keeps it fresh and moist both in the trunk and throughout all its branches, twigs, leaves, and fruit. Venerable Ajaan Khao said how, when the citta has only the present alone with the calm and peace of Dhamma, regardless of how much it gets involved in turbulent, confusing, and distracting things, we people still have nothing but happiness while living in the world of involvement with our own khandhas. There is no need to struggle to find happiness and contentment in other places or realms, which would be creating images to deceive ourselves, causing us to become ambitious and to develop craving, tanha, and the uprising of dukkha, samudaya, the seed of dukkha that would come to burn our own fingers and so make for a lot of dukkha and difficulty in vain. Because the happiness which we know, see, and live with dwells in that heart, and it is a happiness which is already sufficient and complete. This entire world and all other worlds, however many there may be in the universe of samsara, then seem as if they do not exist, but that which does exist and which is quite clear and apparent is the citta with Dhamma, which seems to cover the whole universe, lokadhatu. though to explain this or to make any comparison with it is impossible, because there are no characteristics or data by which one can classify it. For the Chitta and the ultimate Dhamma, Acharya Dhamma, belong to each other, and they are not within the realms of convention, Sammati, so there is no basis for making any comparisons or suppositions. After the end of that Vassa period, those lay supporters who had helped him and looked after him with faith in him invited him to come where they lived and begged him to have metta for them and to be a teacher to them, their village, and the whole district of Sawang Dandin in the province of Sakon Nakhon. So he had to leave the place where he had been staying, even though he longed to go on staying there, and he had not thought of going elsewhere for a long time. When he had taught the villagers for some time, he took his leave of them, and went wandering wherever he felt like going, in the manner of the practice of Thutangakam Martana. Sometimes he crossed the Mekong River into Laos, and stayed on the banks of the river, and at other times he crossed back into Thailand. After this, he went wandering and practicing the way in an area that is mountainous and covered with thick forests, called Motong Jungle, which is in the districts of Bungan and Ponpisai. In this area there are many places which are good and suitable for practicing the way, and there were some newly established villages made up of only a few houses. The people there invited him to spend the Vassa in that place for their benefit, and as it was a place which suited his temperament, he agreed to stay there for that Vassa period.